Professor Velthak floated into the xenobiology classroom on his hover pad, his 4-eye stalks scanning the diverse group of students settling into their biopods. The morning light from Centauri Prime filtered through the crystal windows, casting rainbow patterns across the walls of the Galactic University's most advanced science building. "Good morning, class," the elderly Zephyrian announced, his voice carrying the whistling undertone common to his species. "Today we begin the practical application portion of our xenobiology studies." 23 students from across the galaxy turned their attention to the professor. There were the usual suspects: 3 crystalline Kytherian students whose bodies reflected the morning light like living prisms, a pair of gaseous nebulons floating in their containment suits, 5 heavily armored Vrex warriors whose chitinous plates clicked softly as they shifted in their specialized seats, and several other species Tom Miller had learned to recognize over his first semester as an exchange student. Tom sat in the back corner, the only human in a classroom designed for beings that ranged from microscopic to massive. His standard-issue desk looked tiny compared to the reinforced platforms built for the Vrex or the atmospheric chambers housing the nebulons. At 5 feet 10 inches and 170 pounds, he was smaller than most of his classmates, though he had learned that size meant little when it came to intelligence and curiosity. "As future xenobiologists, you will encounter dangerous life forms throughout your careers," Professor Velthak continued, manipulating the holographic controls with his tentacles. "Today we will test your ability to identify apex predators through their vocalizations alone." The classroom's advanced sound system hummed to life. Tom noticed several students instinctively activating their species' natural defense mechanisms. The Kytherians began to glow with protective energy fields, while the Vrex students' carapaces hardened audibly. Even the peaceful nebulons compressed their gaseous forms into more defensive configurations. "Our first specimen," the professor announced, "comes from the death world of Kepler 442b. Listen carefully to the hunting call of the Shadow Maw." A bone-chilling roar filled the classroom. It started low, like distant thunder, then built into a crescendo of raw predatory rage. The sound seemed to penetrate not just the ears but the very soul, speaking to primal fears that existed across all species. Several students visibly shuddered, and Tom heard the distinctive clicking of Vrex mandibles that indicated extreme stress. The second recording was even worse. The hunting call of a void stalker from Proxima Centauri began as a whisper that somehow carried across the room, then exploded into a series of unearthly shrieks that made every student's natural defenses activate fully. One of the nebulons actually flickered out of visibility for a moment, a defensive mechanism Tom had never seen before. "Excellent responses," Professor Velthak noted, making marks on his holographic tablet. "Your natural fear reactions show proper recognition of apex predator vocalizations. Now, our final specimen comes from a Class 12 death world." Tom looked up from his notes. He had never heard of a Class 12 world before, but the way the professor said it made it sound particularly dangerous. The other students were preparing themselves, energy fields brightening, carapaces thickening, gaseous forms compressing into nearly solid states. The third recording began with a low growl that built into the most terrifying series of sounds Tom had heard in the class so far. Snarls, screams, and roars that spoke of pure predatory fury filled the room. The sounds seemed designed by evolution itself to trigger every possible fear response. They echoed off the walls, creating an acoustic environment that suggested the listener was surrounded by invisible death. Tom burst out laughing. The sound of his laughter cut through the predatory roars like a blade through silk. Every eye stalk, sensor organ, and optical device in the room swiveled toward him. The defensive energy fields flickered with confusion, and the Vrex student's mandibles stopped clicking entirely. Professor Velthak's hover pad spun to face him, all 4 eye stalks focusing on the small human with undisguised bewilderment. "Mr. Miller, is there something amusing about this deadly predator's hunting call?" Tom wiped tears from his eyes, trying to control his laughter. "I'm sorry, Professor, I really am. But that's just a cougar. We call them mountain lions too, or pumas depending on where you're from." He took a deep breath, still smiling. "They sound really scary, but they're actually pretty timid. They usually run away if you make noise at them." The silence that followed was so complete that Tom could hear the hum of the building's air recycling system. 23 alien students stared at him with expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. Professor Velthak's eye stalks blinked in a sequence Tom had learned indicated deep thought. "You are familiar with this creature?" the professor asked slowly. "Oh yeah," Tom nodded. "My dad and I went camping in Colorado last summer. We heard one of these guys near our tent around midnight. Scared us at first because we didn't know what it was, but once we figured it out, Dad just banged some pots together and it took off into the woods. Tom shrugged. They're not really dangerous unless you corner them or get between a mother and her babies. A Kytherian student's crystalline form pulsed with confused colors. But the classification system indicates extreme lethality. I guess they can be dangerous, Tom admitted. But so can a lot of things. You just have to know how to deal with them. Most of the time, they're more scared of you than you are of them. The classroom remained silent as Tom's words settled over his classmates like a revelation none of them had expected. The university cafeteria buzzed with its usual mixture of alien languages and communication methods. Tom Miller sat at his regular table, surrounded by a crowd of students that had grown larger each day since the Cougar incident in Professor Velthak's class. Word had spread through the neural networks and communication channels faster than he had expected. Clicks, a Vrex warrior whose battle-scarred carapace marked him as someone who had seen real combat, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully as he studied Tom. Explain again how your species produces the vocalization that frightens these mountain lions. Tom demonstrated by cupping his hands around his mouth and making a loud whooping sound. Half the cafeteria turned to look at them. Like that but louder. Or you can bang pots and pans together. Really, any loud noise works. They don't like confrontation. A Nebulon student named Wisp, whose gaseous form shimmered with curious blue patterns, pulsed brighter. Your father engaged in recreational camping on a world where such creatures exist freely? Sure, camping is fun, Tom said, taking a bite of his protein cube. We go hiking, fishing, sit around campfires. It's relaxing. The concept seemed to break something in Wisp's understanding. The gaseous being flickered between colors rapidly, a sign Tom had learned indicated intense confusion. Relaxing. On a world with free-roaming predators. Professor Velthak approached their table, his hover chair humming softly as it navigated between the other diners. His four-eye stalks focused on Tom with scientific intensity. Mr. Miller, I have been conducting research since yesterday's class. There appears to be some confusion in our records. Tom looked up from his meal. What kind of confusion? The professor activated a holographic display that materialized above their table, showing a three-dimensional model of Earth spinning slowly in space. Streams of data flowed beside it in various alien languages. Your planet Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world in our galactic database. Class 12 what now? Tom asked. The Galactic Threat Classification System, Professor Velthak explained patiently. It rates planetary environments based on the danger they pose to visiting life forms. Most civilized worlds fall between Class 1 and Class V. Class 12 is considered extremely hazardous. Tom frowned. What's the highest class? Class 15 represents uninhabitable hellscapes where no known life can survive for extended periods. We assumed Earth's rating was a clerical error since your species obviously exists there. A small crowd had gathered around their table. Students from various species listened with growing amazement as the conversation continued. Tom noticed some of them were recording the discussion with their various technological devices. So where are you guys all from? Tom asked, looking around at his classmates. The answers came quickly. Clix's homeworld was Class 3. The Kytherian students came from a Class 2 world described as remarkably peaceful. Wisp's gas giant home was Class 4, and that was considered dangerous mainly because of atmospheric pressure issues. The highest classification anyone claimed was Class V, and that student explained it was only that high because of occasional electrical storms. Tom stared at the holographic Earth rotating above their table. You're telling me that my planet is rated 7 classes higher than the most dangerous world any of you come from? It would appear so, Professor Velthak confirmed. The database lists numerous apex predators, extreme weather patterns, geological instability, and something called Australia, that seems to require its own subclassification system. Australia's not that bad, Tom protested. I mean, yeah, they have some dangerous stuff, but people live there just fine. My cousin Rachel lives in Sydney. She loves it. Clix's mandibles clicked in what Tom had learned was the Vrex equivalent of nervous laughter. Your cousin voluntarily inhabits a region that requires subclassification for extreme danger? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds worse than it is, Tom admitted. But really, most of the dangerous stuff in Australia just wants to be left alone. Don't mess with the snakes, don't swim where there are crocodiles, shake out your shoes before putting them on in case of spiders, and you're usually fine. The holographic display shifted to show images from Earth. Tom watched his classmates' reactions as pictures of great white sharks, grizzly bears, and venomous snakes appeared in the air above their table. A Kytherian student's crystalline body actually cracked slightly from stress when a picture of a saltwater crocodile appeared. These creatures exist in the same environment as your family? Wisp asked, his gaseous form now a deep purple that Tom had learned indicated extreme concern. Yeah, but it's not like we run into them every day, Tom explained. I've lived on Earth for 20 years and I've seen maybe 3 or 4 really dangerous animals in the wild. And that was because I was looking for them. Professor Velthak's eye stalks swiveled between Tom and the holographic display. Mr. Miller, according to this data, your species should not have been able to develop past primitive tool use. The environmental pressures alone should have prevented the formation of complex civilization. Tom thought about this for a moment. Maybe that's exactly why we did develop complex civilization. When everything around you is trying to kill you, you get really good at solving problems quickly. The cafeteria had grown quiet around them. Students from dozens of species listened as the small human casually discussed surviving on what they were beginning to understand was one of the most dangerous worlds in known space. Your species, Click said slowly, are survivors of the highest order. Tom smiled. I guess we are. We just call it Tuesday. The xenobiology classroom had transformed into something Professor Velthak had never seen in his 40 years of teaching. Students arrived early, claimed seats in the front rows, and some even brought recording devices. The formal curriculum had been abandoned 3 days ago when it became clear that Tom Miller's casual descriptions of Earth's wildlife were far more educational than any textbook. Tom stood at the front of the class, feeling slightly uncomfortable with all the attention. Professor Velthak had asked him to share more details about Earth's predators, and somehow he had become an unofficial guest lecturer. The irony was not lost on him that he was probably the least qualified person in the room to teach xenobiology, yet here he was. So yesterday we talked about cougars. Tom began, looking out at the sea of alien faces, sensors and optical devices focused on him. Today I thought I'd tell you about some of the bigger predators on Earth. He activated the holographic display, showing an image of a great white shark breaching the ocean surface, its massive jaws open wide enough to swallow a small spacecraft. The collective gasp from his audience was audible across multiple species. This is a great white shark, Tom explained. They can grow up to 20 feet long and weigh about 5,000 pounds. Those teeth you see are constantly replaced throughout their lifetime. They can bite with a force of about 4,000 pounds per square inch. A Kytherian student's crystalline body flickered with stress patterns. And humans encounter these creatures? Oh, all the time, Tom nodded. People surf, swim and dive in the same waters. My sister Emma went cage diving with great whites off the coast of South Africa last year. She said it was one of the best experiences of her life. Wisp, the Nebulon student, pulsed a sickly yellow color. Your sister voluntarily placed herself in proximity to this creature? Well, there was a protective cage, Tom said reasonably. Most of the time. The classroom fell silent at the words, most of the time. Professor Velthak leaned forward in his hover chair. Most of the time, Mr. Miller? Sometimes the sharks break through the cages, Tom admitted. But that's pretty rare. And even when it happens, shark attacks are incredibly uncommon. You're more likely to be killed by a vending machine falling on you than by a shark attack. Clicks, the Vrex warrior, clicked his mandibles in confusion. Vending machines are more dangerous than these predators? Not really dangerous, just statistically more likely to kill you because people interact with vending machines more often than sharks, Tom explained. Emma always says that sharks are basically just big fish trying to make a living. They don't hunt humans specifically. The next image showed a massive grizzly bear rearing up on its hind legs, easily 12 feet tall with claws the size of daggers. Several students activated their defensive mechanisms instinctively. This is a grizzly bear, Tom continued. They can weigh up to 800 pounds, run 35 miles per hour, and those claws can tear through metal. They're incredibly strong. A grizzly can decapitate a moose with one swipe. The stress levels in the classroom were becoming palpable. Tom noticed that even Professor Velthak's eye stalks were trembling slightly. But here's the thing, Tom added quickly, most bear encounters end with the bear running away. They don't really want to fight humans unless they're protecting cubs or food. My Uncle Jack runs into black bears all the time on his property in Montana. He just makes noise and they leave. A new student, a crystalline being Tom hadn't met before, spoke up in a voice like wind chimes. Your Uncle Jack coexists with multiple apex predators on his territory? Well, black bears aren't really apex predators, Tom corrected. They're more like really big raccoons. They eat berries, fish, garbage. The grizzlies are the dangerous ones, but Jack's never actually seen one on his land. Professor Velthak was frantically taking notes. Mr. Miller, could you describe the apex predator of your world's ocean environments? Tom thought for a moment. That would probably be orcas. Killer whales. They're actually dolphins, not whales, but they can grow up to 30 feet long and hunt in coordinated packs. They're smart enough to beach themselves to catch seals, then work together to get back in the water. The holographic display showed a pod of orcas executing a complex hunting maneuver. The aliens watched in fascinated horror as the black and white predators demonstrated intelligence, coordination, and lethal efficiency. Humans swim with these creatures as well? Asked another VREX student. Some do, Tom nodded. There are no recorded cases of wild orcas killing humans though. They seem to understand that we're not food. The dangerous ones are actually in captivity, where the stress makes them unpredictable. Wisp pulsed bright orange, a color Tom had learned indicated extreme agitation. You imprison these apex predators? Some people do, yeah. For entertainment shows and research. It's controversial. Tom shifted uncomfortably. A lot of humans think it's wrong to keep them in tanks. The classroom buzzed with quiet conversations in various alien languages. Tom caught fragments of translation through his universal communicator. Words like impossible, death wish, and evolutionary miracle. Professor Velthak raised a tentacle for silence. Mr. Miller, I must ask, how did your species survive long enough to develop space travel? Tom grinned, the same easy smile that had started this whole discussion. We learned to be scarier than everything else. The university gymnasium had never hosted such an unusual gathering. Word had spread through the campus networks about Professor Velthak's request for a demonstration of human physical capabilities, and now nearly 200 beings from dozens of species filled the observation decks. The facility's main floor housed the standard Galactic Athletic Assessment course, a challenging obstacle series designed to test the peak physical abilities of the most capable species in known space. Tom Miller stood at the starting line, wearing the simple athletic clothing humans preferred for physical activity. Around him, the gymnasium's environmental systems hummed as they maintained optimal conditions for the diverse audience. He felt small compared to the massive course that stretched before him, with its climbing walls, endurance tracks, and coordination challenges designed for beings much larger and stronger than himself. Professor Velthak floated beside him on his hover platform, addressing the crowd through the gymnasium's public address system. Distinguished colleagues and students, today we will observe a demonstration of human athletic capability. Mr. Miller has volunteered to attempt our standard assessment course. In the observation deck, Clix shifted his armored bulk and clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. The VREX warrior had completed this same course during his first year, and it had pushed even his considerable physical abilities to their limits. Beside him, Wisp pulsed with curious blue patterns while the Kytherian students created a soft rainbow of anticipatory colors. Dr. Sarah Bennett, one of only 3 human professors at the university, leaned forward in her seat. She taught comparative physiology in the medical department and had been eager to see how Tom would perform. This should be interesting, she murmured to her colleague, a towering Zephyrian whose tentacles writhed with excitement. Tom stretched his legs and arms, a ritual that seemed oddly casual given the circumstances. Professor, before I start, could you explain how this usually works? Like, what do most students do? Professor Velthak's 4 eye stalks focused on him. The course is designed to challenge multiple physical attributes. Most students attempt to complete it as quickly as possible, using their species' natural advantages. VREX warriors rely on explosive power, Kytherians channel energy for enhanced strength, and Zephyrians use their tentacles for superior climbing ability. And what's a good time? Tom asked, jogging in place to warm up. The current record is held by Commander Zextal, a VREX Special Forces officer who completed the course in 18 minutes and 37 seconds, the professor replied. Most students require between 25 and 40 minutes, assuming they can complete it at all. Tom nodded and approached the starting line. Okay, here's the thing though. Humans don't really do explosive power the way you guys do. We're more about endurance and persistence. So this might look a little different. The starting signal echoed through the gymnasium and Tom began to run. His pace was immediately noticeable for what it wasn't. Unlike the explosive sprints typical of other species, Tom settled into a steady rhythmic gait that he maintained without variation. While VREX warriors would charge obstacles with overwhelming force, Tom approached each challenge with methodical persistence. At the first climbing wall, a 30-foot vertical surface with minimal handholds, Tom didn't attempt to power his way up like the strong-arm species typically did. Instead, he found a rhythm, moving steadily upward with efficient movements that conserved energy. His breathing remained controlled and even. Fascinating, Dr. Bennett whispered to her colleague. Look at his respiratory rate. It's barely elevated. The second obstacle was a maze requiring both speed and problem-solving skills. Where most species would either rush through using brute force or pause to analyze extensively, Tom maintained his steady pace while his eyes tracked potential routes. He moved through the maze like water flowing downhill, taking the path of least resistance without stopping. By the third obstacle, a series of heavy weights that needed to be moved across a 50-meter distance, the audience began to understand what they were witnessing. Tom didn't try to lift the heaviest weights like the powerful species did. Instead, he selected moderate weights and began carrying them in a steady procession, making trip after trip without rest. He's not trying to win, Clicks observed, his mandibles clicking with realization. He's just continuing. Wisp pulsed bright yellow. Look at the time display. The digital readout showed Tom was maintaining a pace that would easily break the course record, but he didn't seem to be racing. His heart rate, displayed on the gymnasium's monitoring system, showed the steady rhythm of someone taking a casual walk. The endurance section was where Tom's true nature became apparent. A 5-kilometer run on a variable terrain track that included hills, obstacles, and surface changes designed to exhaust even the most athletic beings. Most students walked this section, having spent their energy on the earlier challenges. Tom ran the entire distance at the same pace he had maintained since the starting line. Dr. Bennett was now standing, watching in amazement as her species representative completed obstacle after obstacle without any apparent change in effort level. That's impossible, she muttered. His cardiovascular output suggests he's barely working. As Tom approached the final obstacle, a complex coordination challenge that required precise timing and balance, the gymnasium had fallen completely silent. 200 alien beings watched as the small human navigated the final test with the same methodical persistence he had shown throughout. When Tom crossed the finish line, the timer displayed a new course record, 16 minutes and 42 seconds. But what stunned the audience more than the time was the fact that Tom was still breathing normally, barely sweating, and looked like he could immediately run the course again. Professor Velthak's hover platform drifted toward him, all 4 eye stalks focused intently on the human. Mr. Miller, that performance was unprecedented. Tom toweled off his face and grinned. Thanks, that was fun. Is there a longer version? The grand auditorium of the Galactic University had never been so packed. Students hung from the upper balconies, faculty members stood along the walls, and the overflow crowd watched through holographic displays in adjacent halls. What had begun as a routine final presentation for Professor Velthak's xenobiology class had become the most anticipated academic event of the semester. Tom Miller stood backstage, adjusting his simple presentation clothes and reviewing his notes one last time. Through the curtains, he could hear the buzz of dozens of different languages and communication methods as beings from across the galaxy settled into their seats. The irony wasn't lost on him that he, a 20-year-old exchange student from Earth, was about to give the most watched lecture in the university's recent history. Professor Velthak approached him, his 4 eye stalks betraying nervous excitement. Mr. Miller, are you prepared? The attendance has exceeded our wildest expectations. I think so, Tom replied, though his stomach felt like it was full of butterflies. Just going to tell them about home, right? Indeed, the professor confirmed. Though I suspect your definition of home has proven rather more complex than anyone anticipated. The auditorium lights dimmed and Professor Velthak took the stage. His voice carried clearly through the advanced sound system as he addressed the massive crowd. Distinguished colleagues, students, and guests, today we conclude our xenobiology seminar series with a presentation that has generated unprecedented interest across our academic community. Please welcome Tom Miller, our exchange student from Earth. The applause was thunderous, coming from species that didn't typically applaud, creating a cacophony of sounds Tom had never heard before. He walked onto the stage, feeling very small under the massive dome that housed nearly 1,000 beings from dozens of worlds. Thank you everyone, Tom began, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's systems. I know there's been a lot of curiosity about Earth and its wildlife over the past few weeks, so I thought I'd share some perspective about what it's really like to grow up on what you folks call a Class 12 death world. The first holographic image appeared behind him, the mountain lion whose screams had started everything. The same predator call that had terrified his classmates weeks ago now played softly in the background, but the audience's reaction was notably different. Instead of fear, there was intense curiosity. This is a cougar, also called a mountain lion or puma, Tom explained. Beautiful animal, perfectly adapted predator, capable of taking down prey much larger than itself. On most worlds in the galaxy, this would be the apex predator, the creature everything else fears. He clicked to the next slide, showing his family's camping photos from Colorado. There was his father cooking over a campfire, his sister Emma reading in a folding chair, and Tom himself grinning as he held up a fish he'd caught. This is us camping in Cougar territory last summer. We heard one of these guys near our tent around midnight. My dad banged some pots together and it left us alone. Tom smiled at the memory. On Earth, this isn't unusual. Millions of humans go camping, hiking, and fishing in areas where large predators live. It's called recreation. The audience stirred with quiet conversations. In the front row, Clicks leaned forward, his armored form intent on every word. Beside him, Wisp pulsed with soft blue patterns of fascination. The next series of images were more dramatic. Great white sharks breaching the ocean surface, grizzly bears fishing for salmon, saltwater crocodiles lurking in murky waters. Each image drew gasps from species that had never conceived of such creatures existing alongside intelligent life. These are some of Earth's other apex predators, Tom continued. Great whites, grizzly bears, crocodiles that have remained essentially unchanged for millions of years because evolution couldn't improve on their design. Incredible killing machines, every one of them. A Kytherian student's crystalline form flickered with stress patterns visible even from the stage. But here's what's important to understand, Tom said, his tone becoming more serious. None of these are Earth's true apex predator. The holographic display changed to show a new image. A human family at a beach, children playing in the sand while their parents watched from nearby chairs. In the background, barely visible dorsal fins cut through the water. We are, Tom said simply. Humans became Earth's dominant species not through size, strength, or natural weapons. We used intelligence, cooperation, and something that I think might be unique to us: persistence. He clicked through a series of images showing human achievements. Cities built in deserts, settlements in Arctic conditions, research stations in jungles where every plant and animal could kill the unwary. We didn't adapt to Earth's environment. We adapted Earth's environment to us. The final slide showed Emma's photo from her cage diving experience, but the image was taken from outside the cage. A massive great white shark swam just feet from her face, separated only by metal bars, while she smiled with pure joy. My sister took this photo last month. She's not afraid because she understands something that took our species millions of years to learn: we're not prey. Tom looked out at the silent auditorium. Those scary predator sounds you played in xenobiology class don't frighten us because we've been listening to Earth's monsters our whole lives. We've learned to coexist with them, to avoid them when necessary, and to dominate them when required. He paused, letting his words settle over the audience like a blanket. The universe is vast and dangerous, full of creatures that could kill any one of us in seconds. But humans have been dealing with creatures like that since we climbed down from trees. A cougar's scream doesn't scare us because we've heard it all before. Tom gestured toward the audience, his expression growing thoughtful. The most dangerous predator in any environment isn't the one with the biggest teeth or the strongest bite. It's the one that refuses to give up, that adapts, that works together, and that never stops trying to survive. The auditorium was completely silent. We laugh at your predator sounds, Tom concluded, because we learned long ago that the scariest thing on any planet is us. The applause lasted 23 minutes.